Welcome to a brand new video. Today is going to be a video that's going to help a lot of you out, hopefully. So I've made a few educational videos in the past, but none as in-depth as this and as basic as this. So today I'm going to be presenting you guys with the combat techniques for beginners. Now, even if you don't deem yourself a beginner, it's always worth watching these videos so you can also refresh yourself if you've forgotten some of these things, because some of them are so basic you might just overlook them nowadays. Now, before we get fully into the video, can I remind you guys to please go over to the item shop and put in code Ripire. It's super easy and it's the most direct way to help support the channel, as I am an Epic Games affiliate. Now let's get into the video. So starting off, we're going to start very basic with meds. What meds are the best meds? How do you actually use meds in combat? And actually, when do you use meds in combat? Now, when it comes down to what is the best med in the game, the Slurpfish is by far the best. It can give you 40 health of either health or shield in 1 second, so very, very useful. Now, the reason that's so important is speed is absolutely everything in combat. You want to heal as fast as possible, and you cannot waste any time, so 1 Slurpfish opposed to 2 minis is always better. Now, how do you actually heal? Well, that's kind of hard actually, because if opponents know that you're weak, they're going to be chasing you desperately, so you have to do a lot of things like this. Aim at the ground vertically down and place a ramp. That will place the ramp over you, so if an opponent's trying to shoot you in the back, they have to shoot the ramp first, so you just keep looking down, keep placing that. Change up your mobility, so you're moving in different angles, so that they actually can't follow where you're going. It's really hard for them to shoot you. Change your elevation if need be, so go up or go down a layer. Now what I just did then is boxing up. Very, very important. Still, some people today don't box up when healing. It's stupid. There's no point. You're going to die. So what you do to box up is make sure you can actually build on the elevation you're on. If it's on unfamiliar terrain, say it was on the side of a hill, maybe build a ramp, then a flat, then box up on top of that flat instead of doing it inside the hill. Otherwise it gets a bit messy then. Make sure you can box up by first placing the walls right around you, then look up, place a flat and a cone. Then I normally would then place a cone inside and crouch down to then actually have another layer of protection. So if someone's shooting down, they have to break a cone, a flat, and then this cone. If they're shooting from the side, they have to break the walls and then the cone to get you. So that normally gives you enough time to get that Slurpfish off or whatever med you have. You can then edit out of the cone by simply just selecting one corner, and then that will leave you with this sort of grid available. So just do the simple large edit. You don't want to mess it up, and then just go out. Say if they're above you, this is where I normally place flats, so they can't shoot down, and then I box up again to get a gauge of where my teammates are or where I need to go. Now say if you're really limited on materials and you don't have enough mats to do all that, that is a lot of materials right there. If you can, and you know your opponent's not going to pressure you heavily, and you just want to do a quick med that you don't even know if anyone's even near you, you've just found a big pop for example, and you need to get it off with protected, just simply just place a cone and pop it. Most of the time people aren't even going to try and pressure this because they don't even know you're here if you're not being chased. That now swiftly moves on to the next part of the video, which is cones. Cones are by far the most versatile piece of building, and I'm going to prove that to you right now. As you saw just then, you can use it to heal, but there's loads of other things you can use it for. Here we have a building from Craggy Cliffs, and I'm going to show you how useful cones are. Say if you were ramping up and you wanted to go over there. Well, you can't place a flat because there's technically already an edited flat there. So if you place a cone, it acts like a flat, but it allows you just to walk over it, even though there's already a flat there. It's just placing it easily across. You can place a ramp, yep, that's not a problem, but then you have to edit the ramp to go through the door. Whereas with a cone, you can just walk over it like a flat. It doesn't matter. You might see people quite often blocking themselves off with cones like this. Now the reason people do this is so that if someone's trying to block them off with a cone, they can't because it's already theirs. That's the reason to do it, as well as if you're pushing an enemy that's above you, placing cones means that they don't have a clear line of sight on you. You could be doing all this along the ramp, and they don't know where you are underneath that cone, and they have to break the cone to shoot you first. So it's just a layer of protection. It may look advanced, but it's really not. It's really basic. All you're doing is placing a ramp, then a cone. Now, to actually place the cone optimally, you actually want to be about halfway up the first ramp, if that makes sense. So if you see this is where this ramp starts, you'd be out here to place the cone. You don't want to do it on the ramp that it's actually attached to, because then you have very little time to quickly edit the cone. You want to do it as far back as possible. So if you were doing it here, for example, you could see you could go all the way almost to like here, which is halfway up the first ramp. So you can place it there, and then you can just keep doing it at the very start of the new ramp. It may look hard, but it will get there very quickly if you just practice it in creative. The other thing that's really useful about cones is, say if you're in a box and an enemy's pressuring you when you're just trying to heal or something, you can use the cone to hide behind so that they can't shoot you, and you can just shoot over them, like keep peeking up, because it's actually a little bit of elevation compared to a flat, but not too much like a ramp. You can use it to hide behind and get easy shots off. But say if they did get into your box, or you could see them trying to take your wall, which I'll get into that in a minute, then they did take your wall, instead of just, you know, running out the back, you can edit the cone like a ramp, then run out the back. So you have to break this first. And the cone is so much easier to edit, because you can edit it in any order you want, compared to a ramp, which is really like, kind of finicky to do so. It's not as good. So a cone's quite a lot easier. Now switching on to the other side, say if you're the one that's pushing the enemy and they're trying to heal, they have pretty good ping and they know what they're doing, they're going to hold the wall. So you shooting doesn't mean you'll get it, they'll just hold the wall. Imagine they're holding the wall here. You won't get it, they'll just run out the back and you have to try it all again. They'll probably heal up and then you'll probably have to start the fight again and probably lose. So instead of just doing that, it's always better to try and actually take the wall. Like this. So what I'm doing right now, I'll try and slow-mo it for you, is pickaxing it once, then pickaxing it twice, and then holding out the wall to try and take it as my own. They'll be holding it as well, so you have to be very, very, very quick about this. It's quite easy to practice in creative, but you see what I was doing? I was positioning myself on the left-hand side, which means I have a right-hand peak, so if I did have this, I can open up and edit like this, and then get a nice corner edit like this, and they could barely even see me when doing this. If you want to do a really protected edit, it's always good to do a top corner edit like this, so you can jump up and they can only see your head for about a split second, which is kind of risky as well, because every time you edit a build you'll see its health go down. So if you do multiple in a row like this, and then you're doing this edit, they can just shoot this a couple times and take the wall back. Now if you did get the wall and they haven't got anything inside the box, I'd recommend putting a cone in there. Now instead of doing a huge edit like this where you can easily get shot and placing a cone, it's much better to do like a tiny little window edit like this and position yourself on the left so they can't actually shoot you. If you just aim your cursor in the middle of your screen through the window, it will place the cone. Can you see that? It's going to place it there. You can do this on either side, it doesn't really matter. But then once you've got the cone there, re-edit it like that. Don't worry about the speed comes with practice. And then you could do something like a Ripire Revel, or you could just try and open up the edit to try and shoot them. Now if you're not sure what a Ripire Revel is, it's simply just editing these three corners here, or this side, either corner really, and then editing the cone like this, just one corner of the cone so it's flush, and then you can hold the edit on the cone, find out where your opponent is, reset the cone, still holding the edit, find out where you want it, aim your cursor ready at their head, so then when you confirm it you can shoot it. So it'd be like this. Now when you're trying to heal up and someone's trying to take your wall and you're holding it pretty well, you can see they're not getting it first time. It's always good to wait for them to have their pickaxe out and just after they've hit your wall, do a large edit. So they're more than likely going to do this. They're going to swing for the air, which takes longer to switch back to their gun. So then when this is happening, you can open up the edit, instantly pop a shot on them, and then reset them. This is then going to most likely make them scared and run off to try and heal up themselves. You've then switched the scenario from a defensive scenario to an offensive scenario. This is when then you can go and try and take high ground or try and pressure them. Now that's going to swiftly move on to the next bit of my video, which is going to be talking about taking height, why high ground is so important, and how to get it almost every time. If you're against a creative warrior who's going up really high, barely even shot you, there's just a simple technique for this. It's called shooting down. He either more likely isn't prepared to be shot down, because in creative most people don't, so just shoot them down. They'll normally take a bit of damage, and while it's falling, just start building your own base up. As you can see here, I'm doing 90s, which is something I'll cover in a second. But once you've then got high ground, you can then pressure them below and then easily drop down to try and finish the fight. Most of the time with creative warriors, the second they have not got high ground, they panic and normally die. But say if you're against quite a competent player who's built a decent structure that you can't shoot down easily, then it's pretty easy actually. All you have to do is pressure them a little bit and then just make them drop down to you. Just box up, feel relaxed, you know. Just make them come down to you. Once they're on your wall, don't even try and do anything fancy. Just simply place a ramp behind you like this so they can't shoot you. Or this could be a cone that I edited earlier. And then edit out the back. and then just take height from them while they're on your wall. They won't even know what's going on. Now you've got height on them. They're still down there thinking you're there. Now when I said that I could teach you how to get high ground almost every time, there's a lot of different techniques to try and master here. There's things that are very basic, such as double ramping, so you have a ramp above you and then a ramp in front of you. The way I just did that then, if you're trying to see it in slow motion, is on a flat, or this can be done on many different building pieces, just to look down and place a ramp like I showed earlier when trying to protect yourself, then put a normal ramp in front of you, you're looking up and down, up and down. This is then stopping anyone from shooting above you, and then you could turn this into a 90 after that, and then just try and take height like on that. Now this is still a basic video, so I'm trying to not go into too much depth and try and show things that most people won't use in normal games, because this is at the end of the day a beginner's guide and not like a creative warrior's guide or a pro player's guide. But something I think all players should learn is when actually using a wall and enemies, for example, boxing up, just to aim your crosshair about a foot or so above the actual wall with a cone applied. This will then place a cone above that wall, blocking them off. So then you could just go above, edit the cone, and shoot them. It's super quick, super simple. Kind of hard to get the actual crosshair placement used to, because a lot of the time you'll do that, like I just did then, when you'll just place it above yourself. But if you just do a jump, it can make it a lot easier, because then you're not moving your crosshair as much. Instead, your character's gaining elevation naturally. It's quite simple once you get the hang of it. So now I'm going to talk about something that applies to every single game, no matter what level of player you are, and that is your loadout. So each player has a different way of organising their loadout, but what consists inside the loadout is what's important. So I'm going to break down the two different types of loadout that you need to know and why you should know them. This is loadout 1. This is like a very common loadout you'll see me rock. I have a shotgun and an AR. The AR's for long range to medium range to even close range at times, and the shotgun's exclusively for close range. Then I have triple meds. I have minis, chugs, and of course big pots. Now the reason I have it in this order is so that I can easily go to my chug straight away, or my mini straight away, and then use my big pots later. But depending on which way you organise your loadout, you want your immediate meds to be the fastest meds to deploy. So for example the chugs, because they take literally no time just to throw a chug down. Then your minis, so you could easily do that, and then the big pots if you somehow run out of all the other meds, or you just need to get that last 50. Now the reason it's so important to run triple meds is so that you're able to recover from almost any fight, because a lot of the time fights take so long and are so drawn out and could kill you almost just from storm damage, how long they could take. It's always important to run multiple different types of meds. Instead of just shield, you can have white meds as well. That's what the chugs are. They're healing my white health, whereas the shields are healing my shield. So hope that makes sense, but I'm going to show you now the second loadout I'd recommend. Now moving on to the second loadout, this is what the second loadout looks like. You can see I've dropped the floppers for the sniper. Now normally I would keep the floppers over the sniper if the opportunity presented itself, but if you didn't have any spare meds and the sniper was there, I would take it just because you can get nice long range shots with it. Now I wouldn't recommend using special weapons like snipers, RPGs and things like that all the time, because they're stuff that is better to actually try and practice your mechanics with shotguns and ARs if you're wanting to get better. But if the opportunity presented itself and you were able to get, and I'm not going to really deny it in like a competitive aspect, because an RPG is always broken and always very useful. Now coming back to something I was talking about earlier, which was 90s. Now 90s is something that scares a lot of people, and I'm not sure why, because once you pick them up they're very easy. To do a really basic 90 is simply this: placing a ramp, you can then place a wall, another wall, and then a ramp. So wall, ramp, wall, ramp, wall, ramp. Now instead of just tapping it, you can hold it quite easily. So wall, ramp, wall, ramp, wall, ramp. And you get the idea. As you see there, my crosshair placement wasn't at the wall and instead over there, so I placed it down there. Now the reason that this is not optimal is because it's really weak as a structure right now. You can see it's only held up by a couple builds. Someone could just easily spray this out. That's why I use, and every other pro will use, floors as well. So it's a little hard at first, but it's then easy to pick up once you've developed the first technique. So a really consistent one to use is actually placing a wall here instead of here, first off, then another wall, then a flat, and then a ramp, and then do the same again. So turn 90 degrees, wall, flat, ramp. Now it doesn't matter which way you turn, by the way. That's a common misconception. It's whatever feels natural to you. So there's not really any benefit. I mean, you can, depending on which way your opponent is orientated, say you want the wall to be facing them really, but most of the time you're not going to think that in depth, and probably they won't matter, but that's the only other opportunity you'd have to change which direction you actually turn, is depending on which your opponent's at. But he's going to be moving so fast anyway, you're not going to be one to the right, one to the left, one to the right, one to the left. You're not going to be doing that. So it's very simple, just wall, wall, flat, ramp, wall, wall, flat, ramp. Now the reason you have to jump is otherwise if you don't jump and you just do like this, you can phase above it sometimes, but most of the time you'll get Harry Pottered, which is when you get stuck under the stairs like this. That's why you normally jump on this one. Now there's a few different techniques for 90s. You saw the most basic one down there, and then the second one was a bit more advanced. This one is what the most basic would look like with flats, just simply like this. Very smooth, really exaggerate your movement with 90, like really overlook. Maybe up your sensitivity for building when doing this to allow you to actually get those over exaggerated movements. Really slow, really consistent, that's the best way to do it. Now if you want to speed it up though, there's always this type of 90, where instead of starting down and then up, then to the right, start actually over here, and then you flick over to the left, so it looks like this. That's the one I normally use, but it's a bit harder, and the reason is because it's a lot faster. So it is a lot quicker to do, but it's also a lot more inconsistent, and you normally would have to do warm up beforehand. Which then brings me on to my next section, which is warming up. This is going to be really brief because I made an entire video talking about the best way to warm up. So just really quick, make sure you go into free build and just do some free building like this, practicing your moves just before any game, and then try and play some creative, just a basic warm-up routine. If you want a really advanced one, make sure to go and watch my other video on it because it's really useful and I would recommend it all the time. The next thing is going to be really important, something all of you should learn, which is how to close the gap in fights. Say if I don't have a sniper like I don't right now, and this guy's pressuring me with an AR on this ramp, how do I get from here to over there without dying, as well as trying to keep the high ground? Well, that's quite simple, and I'm going to show you how right now. First off is ramps, so just placing ramps like this, going halfway up, and then I normally hold the edit so I can see if he's moving down. So if you're not familiar with this, don't worry about it right now. It's definitely something to learn, but right now just walking up the ramps will be okay, because a lot of the time you can see through the builds long enough. But if you wanted to get a clear picture, just do that. Now once you're about this sort of level close to the build, you don't want to be right underneath them before you try and take your height. You're going to try and reinforce it. Instead of just doing a single ramp, you're going to do a triple layer ramp rush, which I'll show you in a second. Now for example, if he was pressuring you with the AR really heavily, there was 2 or 3 of them shooting this one thing, then don't worry about it, just place a wall in front. He'll then try and spray that. This is when you don't want to stand here anymore. You want to either retreat back to your team or go to the side and box out and just make as many layers as possible. Really confuse where the hell you are. Spam builds the hell out of it. Changing elevation, dropping down if there's a hill for example, or going up if you can as well. Whatever it is to get out of their line of sight. But if you're in a fair 1v1 and you've overwhelmed this guy by getting so close to him so quickly, this is where you want to do the triple layer ramp rush. There's 2 versions of this, so I'm going to quickly show it to you on the side. First one being if you place a ramp and then a wall, then you place a flat, then a wall, and then you jump for the ramp, so like this. Now this is the really basic one. Now it's kind of annoying because you have jump fatigue, so after a while you'll be able to do as many of these because you'll just start jumping really low. So the better one to do is actually over here, which is if you place a wall like you would there, it's the same combination of builds but in a different order. So instead of placing the flat like this, you're placing a ramp, then you're placing the wall like you would do like a double layer ramp rush, and then the flat underneath. So it's like this instead. And if you see, if I jump down, it's the same type of builds, just in a different way. Now if you're not very confident with that and you don't want to waste a lot of materials, don't worry. Just do a 2 layer ramp rush for now, so just a wall in front. Most of the time that should be enough. The reason you do this is so that they don't think twice about trying to knock you out. If they see a 3 layer ramp rush, they know most of the time it's going to take longer to knock you out than it is for them to try and take the height. So instead of knocking you out, they'll try and build up as well. So say if you are here doing that exact thing now, you're building up, and they just built up as well, so he's now in line with you. They're probably about this. This is when you deploy the cone. So you want to then cone over there, like this. So imagine the wall's here. So imagine, I'll put the wall there to show you where you should aim. So like I showed earlier, about a foot above, there you go, now he's coned off. Now you even can do 2 things. Open it up and shoot him, or place a flat and then open it up and shoot him. Now the reason you place the flat is otherwise he might place the flat himself. That's a smart deploy by him because he can then place a flat, stopping you from opening it and shooting him. In this time, he can either do a side jump and take height from like that, or he can do something else, which is what I normally do, and you'll see me do quite often. Let's go harder, there you go. Is to place a flat like this, then a ramp, then editing through, resetting, and taking height like that. Basically the same thing without any risk of falling short by hitting this when trying to do a side jump. Now, if you're trying to get really good piece control, this is actually yourself. Now, if you're not sure what piece control is, that's perfectly understandable. It is controlling the fight by taking pieces of builds before your opponent does. So before they take this wall, you already have it. So then you can just open it up and shotgun them, and then reset it if need be. But for example, if you're not very confident with this is all too much to handle. It's okay. You can just turn to your right, try and jump up like this, and then most of the time, if you haven't got the cone, and they're still trying to come up through this, they'll still be ramping up like this, and then they're more than likely going to be exposed. They probably won't look back, so you can shoot them. Then if they do a full 180 like this, you can either try and do one or two things. First thing being, you look over, place a cone. There you go, now they're coned off. Very easy, very simple. Now that's given you enough time to up like this, and then have the height again. Or you can do this. You can instead try a different approach entirely, go to the side, and just hope you'll be able to knock them out or spray them as they're running up their ramp. Now each fight's different, and it's always hard to try and gauge like this because I don't know what your opponent's going to be like. They might not even try and ramp up. They might be so dumb they don't even try and ramp up or protect themselves. Or they might be a creative god and do all this perfectly like I've just shown. It's very hard to gauge, but more than likely you're going to have the advantage if you follow these techniques. Now the other way to close the gap in a fight is by using the utilities in the game. This is stuff like launch pads if they're in the game at the moment, glider redeploy if they're in the game, which is more than likely not, zip lines if possible, make sure to jump on them so you don't get shot out, and things like the 0-point rocks that are now available in the game, rivers. Just use your terrain to navigate to them quickly and efficiently. When it comes to editing in combat scenarios, there's multiple edits to make. For example, a really simple one to make is if you were taking an opponent's box and you got their wall, just to simply open up the middle and shoot them. Now the reason I went to the left there instead of going to the right is so you have the right hand peek. Because your character is actually positioned on the left hand side of your screen, there's less real estate for you to see the screen when it's on the left. So it's always better to have a look on the right hand side, so it's the right hand peek. If you look on your screen, you'll see what I mean. Your character's on the left hand side more than the right, so it's a lot easier to see on the right than it is on the left. So you open up the edit like this, and then you can just slide in, or you can go crouch below and then jump up. Doesn't really matter. That's a really basic one. You can do things like other windows as well to confuse them. So you can open a window over here, and they're like, okay, he's going to shoot me through there and that. Instead, I'm going to open this one and shoot you here. There's multiple different ways to do this. You can do things like the top corner edit, and just jump up like this, or slice a layer off the top and jump up like that. That's a bit harder and a bit more open. Now the most consistent and common edit you'll see me do personally is this edit here. The reason being it's just really quick and really hard to mess up, because even if you do mess it up, you'll end up doing this instead, which is still allowing you to walk through quickly. Whereas if you always go to that, you're more than likely going to mess it up and eventually just make a door. And then, while that is okay to go through, it slows you down because you have to open the door. If you've taken the high ground off someone after you've done 90s and they're moving away, they're moving down there instead of underneath you now, and you want to keep the height, instead of dropping down, you can just do this. You can place a flat and a cone to move along while reinforced. Now, the problem with this is that most people are going to try and shoot you out, so you then have to be quite good at doing this, editing down and waterfalling. Waterfalling is simply placing and then catching yourself on a cone, a flat, or a ramp. I normally do cones, but it's up to you. Now, the reason I did a flat and a cone here is to allow it to be double reinforced, so if someone's trying to shoot you out, they have to break the flat, then the cone to it to break, instead of just being a flat. Similarly, if I'm on the same layer as someone, and we're both doing this towards each other, I will normally place walls like this so that they can't actually shoot me while I'm pushing towards them, and it normally overwhelms them very quickly. This will not work if they're above you or below you. It's only if they're on the same layer as you, and it's normally only one or two instead of this many. It's normally just one or two, and then they'll try and go for height or something. So it's normally something like this, and then they'll try and go for height, and then that's when all the other bits come into play. that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I really hope it's helped a lot of you out. If you did enjoy this video, as it has taken a long time to make, please leave a like to show your support. But to this video guys, peace.